Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rogier van den Berg. I'm Director of Urban Development at World Resources Institute. I have the honor to moderate a great session today on Vanguard cities from nature-based solution on Africa and Europe. This is part of the Climate Adaptation Summit. It's our second day. We kicked off yesterday. And we already had two of these sessions on nature-based solutions in cities. Yesterday, one around interventions and about applications in the Americas, and also one around applications of nature-based solutions in cities in the Asia Pacific. We have a great lineup of speakers, but I'm not going to introduce them all right now. I will do that later on. I'll just give you a little bit of context. So the Global Commission on Adaptation is installed action tracks, and one is on nature-based solutions. For a year long, partners have been working with the government of, with the support of the government of Canada, Mexico, the UN Environmental Program, and the GEF, the Global Environmental Facility. And today we'll present the findings and we present what has happened under the Vanguard Cities on Nature-Based Solutions work. But before getting a little bit deeper into what has been done this year, I want to give the floor to Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, the CEO of the GEF, the Global Environmental Facility, and steering committee member of the Nature-Based Solutions Action Track. He will have his address and then I'll get back to you. So Carlos, please.
It is my pleasure to speak today at this important event, connecting the dots between nature-based solutions and climate adaptation, which puts the limelight on cities. As the world is rapidly urbanizing, it is critical that our cities become resilient to the shocks and stress caused by climate change, nature degradation, and of course, pandemics. Nature-based solutions such as green spaces, rain gardens, permeable pavement, urban wetlands, urban forests can help address these and other challenges as measures seek to recover from COVID-19 crisis and build more resilient, inclusive, and prosperous cities. The huge significance of nature-based solutions in building adaptive capacities in warming planet and protecting from climate extremes has been championed by the Global Commission on Adaptation, and I'm proud to be one of the commissioners contributing to its efforts. It is now time for real action on the ground for scaling up nature-based solutions and mainstreaming this initiative in municipal policies, planning, and investments. Given the growing numbers of people worldwide moving to and living in cities, we need to have city leaders who are at the front line of action and decision-making on board. I would like to thank the municipal leaders who have already joined the group of global Vanguard cities, showing their commitment for nature and nature-based solutions. Accra, Freetown, Kigali, Addis Ababa are the lighthouse cities for Africa, and their action and political leadership has had a ripple effect across the continent and all over the world. I'm glad to mention here our special relationship with Freetown and Kigali, who are part of this event and are under the partner cities under the GF Sustainable Cities Program. Our global platform for sustainable cities and initiatives such as WRI's Cities for Forests program provide great opportunities for cities to learn from each other on the application of these very important nature-based solutions. I look forward to engaging with many more majors and municipal leaders as we work toward making cities low carbon, resource positive, and of course, and very importantly, climate resilient. We need to move quickly in converting our targets and commitments into practice, into action. There are still a number of systematic barriers for scaling up nature-based solutions. For instance, there are the limited investment, limited understanding of its economic value, and ability to measure its impacts. Clearly, this requires effort and partnership at the global level. We are in a defined year of climate action as the world initiates economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And UNFCCC COP26 is a great opportunity for all of us to aim for decisive action. I'm encouraged by the UK presidency's leadership on nature-based solution in this year's COP. We cannot achieve our climate goals without net zero, resource positive, climate resilient cities. Today's Climate Adaptation Summit and the dialogue on nature-based solutions will set the necessary groundwork and inspire global leaders to make nature-based solutions in cities key to achieving the Paris climate goals. The GF remains a commitment as a core partner for cities, the private sector, and national governments in tackling the systematic barriers altogether. And we look forward to working with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for this address. Very much appreciated, sketching a broad picture of opportunities and the work that has been done by Vanguard cities in Africa. Before we go to the series of speakers, I want to shed some light on what has been achieved under the Vanguard cities work this year. The Vanguard cities work has been part of the Nature-Based Solutions Action Track under the Global Commission of Adaptation, and has been kind of closely related to the work that happened in the Cities Action Track. Yesterday we had our anchoring event, Resilient Cities Anchoring event, where the 1000 Cities Adapt Now program was launched, and this NBS Vanguard Cities work has been kind of integral part of delivering upon the promises of that Resilient Cities Action Track. Let me first shed some light on the kind of the three key deliverables of the work that happened this year. First of all, with the Commission's support, the Action Track team launched 3 new knowledge products. One, an NBS Nature-Based Solutions Toolkit for Cities. The second is an Urban Forests Learning Guide. And the third is a Social Equity Learning Guide. And these knowledge products, they offer practical guidance to cities on planning, designing, and implementing inclusive nature-based solutions for adaptation. In addition, again, with the Commission support, the Action Track advanced the concept of nature-based focused project preparatory facility. This PPF is aiming at building a pipeline of city-led nature-based projects that are positioned to access large-scale infrastructure finance and capital markets. We will advance this further, and we're looking at building momentum for a possible launch at COP26 in Glasgow. And it's very difficult to get the kind of the business case of nature-based solutions right. And this is why these preparatory facilities are so important, with a focus on nature-based solutions in cities. In addition, the dialogue at the 3 regional panels I mentioned already yesterday, we have been discussing the Americas, we have been discussing Asia Pacific, the 3 regional panels at the Climate Adaptation Summit. They bring together a city network of 12 Vanguard cities with a focus on nature-based solutions in cities, and with the aim to set the foundation for developing a call of action by cities on forests and climate that will be released in the lead up to COP26 in Glasgow. And it's very, very important to have these Vanguard cities sharing experiences and also opening up a dialogue with national and the international community to really set the foundation for action, as Carlos Manuel Rodriguez just mentioned in his address. So that is what has happened a lot, and we are moving forward. This is not an endpoint. We're only gaining momentum. We're accumulating experience and cities in this effort. I now want to move forward with our panel with great speakers from Freetown, Sierra Leone, from Accra in Ghana, and from Kigali in Rwanda. And I want to invite to the stage Eric Hubbard. Hi, Eric. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, all.
It's great to have you here. I have to say, Mayor Yvonne Akisayer from Freetown, she sent her regrets. I have been in a panel before with you, I think a few weeks ago. I'm very happy that you can replace her and share your experience. You're a senior technical advisor and you lead the team that implements the World Bank funded Freetown, the Tree Town campaign to plant and grow 1 million trees over 2020 and 2021 in the rainy season to address flood risk, landslide susceptibility, and protect the water supply in Freetown and the Western Area Peninsula. Thank you very much. Welcome. Eric, can you kick off with telling a bit about your experience on nature-based solutions in Freetown and how you adopted them? I already kind of shed some light on the 1 million trees, the Freetown campaign, but over to you to explain much more in a more articulate manner. Eric, the floor is yours.
Okay, Roger, thank you very much. It is a great pleasure for me and for us to be here, for me to be here specifically and particularly on behalf of the mayor. Through our the Freetown, the Tree Town campaign to plant and grow 1 million trees is a component of our overall development strategy for the city of Freetown, which is our Transform Freetown agenda. Within the context of that 4-year agenda, the mayor and the city council established a bold marker to move forward with to increase tree cover in the city by 50% from 2018 levels by 2022. And this is to address the significant challenges that a city like ours, a coastal city, like many other coastal cities, we have the climate challenge word map of sort of rapid urbanization, intense deforestation, loss of tree cover, the loss of habitat, and biodiversity that has, and also sort of significant threats to the water supply through the loss of reservoir capacity. All of those sort of have led to specific issues around flood risk, landslide susceptibility because of the topography of our city, as well as coastal erosion and sea level rise. So we needed, and then we look at that coupled with sort of through the way in which our energy and transport sectors are structured, the level of, as I said, urbanization and the number of people that are living in such a small space, rising carbon emissions. We have those critical challenges that we need to systematically address. And so as a part of our overall adaptation strategy, we have worked this into kind of a pathway for adaptation implementation that looks at, driven by nature-based solutions. We look at reforestation. We look at structuring community-led planting and stewardship, deep community engagement, as well as carbon offsets, a sustainable financing mechanism where we utilize an investment dynamic around the trees that we plant in order to plant and grow, in order to continuously plant more trees strategically throughout the city, specifically targeting two major components. Our first phase of the project was about reducing risk. And so we targeted tree planting in the upper catchment areas and high slope areas that were specifically designed to reforest specific areas to address flood risk and to address landslide susceptibility. In doing so, we planted and are currently growing 245,000 trees. We did that over a period with a grant from the World Bank. We leverage those resources to build the infrastructure, meaning community growing teams across 45 reforestation areas to plant those 245,000 trees. And that happened over a 2 to 2.5 month period, very close to the end of the rainy season because the resources came very late, which links to our pressing problem that all cities have in terms of how do you get financing to ensure that you can move these processes forward when you need to, and how do you leverage the financing when you need it, and then create a context where those resources are continuous, because we're not, the goal is not to plant a tree, but it's to grow that tree and to ensure the survival of the tree. So what we did within the context of our strategy around nature-based solutions and the tree planting within the context of risk reduction, what we did was we linked it to, we saw this as critical green infrastructure, and we built in a level of green technology. So the technology that we used allowed us to build a digital footprint of every tree. So we have a digital footprint of all of our trees, and through that digital footprint that is on our tree tracker platform, and we have a tree tracker app that allows us through community growing teams and stewards to collect the data on all of the trees. We can then demonstrate and track growth digitally. But then we can also take that as a digital representation of impact that we can then share as offsets to corporate and institutional partners. So we have built a carbon offset dynamic that builds out sustainable financing for the green infrastructure that we're building out. So we leverage institutional financing from the World Bank so that we can then move into a deeper level of impact-based financing that we can get from global and local partners that are willing to invest in the impact. So our adaptation strategy is driven through reforestation, but that reforestation is it's integrally linked to communities, community-owned processes of planting and growing, and we have incentivized that particular growing and created in the meantime about 535 during this phase green jobs. Where through that process, through the process of caring for the trees, growing the trees, there are incentive payments that go into communities. And so in the context of the COVID crisis, we were able to create jobs, and we were able to connect the income to overall growth, and then the way in which people connect to those trees. It's already beginning to reverse the context around deforestation within communities.
Thank you so much, Eric. Wow, you touched upon many very interesting things. Not to plant, but to grow, sustainable financing, the sequencing of financing, the role of communities and the role of data, and focusing on impact. We'll continue this discussion. We'll get you back later in this discussion. Thanks a lot for opening the session. I want to move to Desmond. Desmond Chris Appiah. He's the Chief Sustainable Advisor in Accra in Ghana, and he coordinates all activities that inform resilience, climate change, and sustainability of the city of Accra. And he also leads the city's efforts to develop a climate action plan that is compatible with the Paris Agreement. And welcome, Desmond, to this panel. Want to give you the opportunity. Hi, yes. Giving you the opportunity to share your experiences, to share how Accra has been moving in this kind of opportunity of nature-based solutions in the city of Accra. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. It was gladdening to listen to Eric and the strides that they are making in Freetown. And I see they are going for 1 million trees. I think Accra is yet to make a bold statement on 1 million trees, but we've been following and we are very glad about it. I think we have also completed and launched the first climate action plan for the city of Accra late last year. And so that aspect has been concluded. We in Accra were very concerned about some of the key challenges that we're facing that we believe nature-based solutions could help. One of them is flooding. Virtually almost every year, we experience some flooding. And it's but because Accra is quite surrounded by hills and it's quite low-lying. And so we realized if we continue with the rate of urban sprawl that is going on, we would have to really deal with a number of issues which down the line, as the population also grows, will become a real big difficult thing to manage. We also were interested in ensuring that urban heat islands that are being created with a rapid rate of development would also be tackled. We're also concerned about the quality of air. There's a program that we're working on which consistently, with the monitoring of the air quality, we're realizing that the rate of transportation, building, and all that was affecting the quality of the air. We also, interestingly, were concerned about the rate of informality development and squatter development in open spaces. And that was one concern because of migration from up north down south. It used to be seasonal. It's become a bit more permanent recently. And so most of these migrants rather occupy the open spaces that we have. And sometimes it's compounds the challenges that we have with waste management, which I think is a common thread across many global south cities. And so our interest in pursuing urban nature-based solutions in our urban setting was to try and address virtually all these challenges that we had highlighted. We look back and we realized that here in Accra, back in the 1950s, there was a major urban forestry program that was undertaken. And in the areas that we call bourgeoisie these days, they all stuck to ensuring that the greening that was done has been preserved. If you oversee the city, you see to the eastern part of the city, there's good greening, there's real integration of forestry activities in the urban development. Then you look to the west, and it's not the same. So it's kind of a clear divide between, and you would also see that the standard of living in the east is much higher than the standard of living in the western side of the city. So these were part of the challenges, and we launched in 2018 a major greening and sustainability initiative, which identified 25 open spaces that we started working on. We worked also with the private sector because in the city's budget, there was not a lot that was allocated to green or sustainability related functions, the way the structure of the city administration is. And so we worked a lot with the private sector. We've been able to get some of the private sector to adopt some of the spaces. We launched a program called Adopt a Space. And out of the 25 spaces that we had identified in the city, we've got private, especially the banks. They seem to be very interested in these kind of initiatives, and we are working with them. We've been able to convert about 10 of these open spaces into beautiful green spaces. And we've integrated quite a lot of bent bricks for benches and the like for people to kind of enjoy the space. Then in our laws, our building code, there's a certain 35% space that is supposed to be left permeable surface in all development. It has been on the laws for a long time, but its implementation has been very difficult. I think beginning people abide by it. After a while, they built up the 35% space. They either put some concrete or cement and it becomes something else. But we realized that was in the law to ensure that the city, with the quantum of rain that we have, that at least it will not flood. And then we also are working on a program with the WHO and the Ghana EPA, which is on air pollution. And as I mentioned earlier, our strategy was also part of the control of the quality of air. And so that project is ongoing, and that involved giving of seedlings to schools, which we think has been very successful. Almost all the schools within our jurisdiction, we engage them to understand the kind of seedlings they look for. And as you can imagine, the kids always love the fruit trees, and they take care of it. We're even instituting an award scheme for the schools that have done pretty well with the maintenance of these trees. We've given awards to entities that have been ensuring their spaces are greened and maintained, kind of giving some recognition to be sure that they are encouraged to keep it up. And then as part of our climate action plan, we have made greening a key activity that has to be undertaken. And so here in Accra, these are some of the key things. We've launched 100,000 trees planting initiative with the support of the European Union. And fortunately, we've got the Forestry Commission to also meet with us. The key challenge we're having now is where we're going to plant the 100,000 trees and how we'll be sure that it's evenly distributed. But part of our strategy is to encourage households to come for seedlings and to plant in their space. We think that straight away gives ownership and the care of these trees. I'm happy about the digitization that Eric mentioned, and I think maybe from these conversations we can engage to appreciate a bit more what they are doing and see what we can learn to be able to implement here in Accra as well. So in a broad sense, I'm sure as we go deeper into the conversation, we'll be able to give some more details. But generally, these are the nature-based solutions that Accra is implementing to try to address those specific challenges that I had mentioned before.
Thank you so much, Desmond, for your address. Very interesting to hear, especially the multi-benefits that you're addressing: air quality, heat islands, flooding, but also open space and public space. I'm very fascinated by your analysis of the East versus the West and how nature and green relates to kind of the prosperity of a place and kind of the economic reality of a place. And that's not only in Accra, we've seen it in the US, in Europe. If you go into the data of cities, there's an analogy between green and social prosperity and economic prosperity. Sorry. Very interesting to hear. Let's move now to our next speaker. We've been now in Freetown, in Accra, both coastal cities. We moved to Kigali, Rwanda. I had the opportunity to work actually in each of the cities that we're discussing today. Beautiful places. Great that you are here, Liliane Uwanziga Mupende, the Green Climate Fund's National Adaptation Plan Project Coordinator to build flood resilience capacities in Rwanda. Very happy that you are here. Please tell us how you, in the city of Kigali, have been able to adopt and apply nature-based solutions in the city. Welcome, Liliane.
Thank you very much, Roger. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. I'm sure we're all on different timestamps, but it's a pleasure to be here today. I will, like my colleagues have spoken before me, both Eric and
Desmond.
Desmond, yes. Eric and Desmond have spoken before me. Rwanda and specifically the city of Kigali have had extensive reforestation projects and programs. We've also had extensive programs on wetland restoration and wetland protection using nature-based solutions in the aim of trying to adapt our city and our country to the challenges of climate change. But likewise, we've also established several policies at a national level that have informed efforts at the level of the city of Kigali, as well as in the separate different secondary cities and districts. This starts with our green growth strategy, which looks at aspects of green growth and climate resilience, with the aim of guiding all urbanization efforts, all planning efforts to make sure that we are actually aiming at climate resilience. As a part of this, the city of Kigali, as well as the secondary cities, have engaged in a master planning process that has specifically adapted all interventions towards dealing with climate change. You find this is also enhanced or coupled with other initiatives such as the Green Minimum Building Compliance System, which is adapting our building code elements towards efforts of climate adaptation, as well as climate resilience in our building approach, as well as in our urbanization approach. But that's on a general level in terms of our national as well as local interventions. For today, I would like to speak specifically to the GCF NAP project that we are working on in collaboration with Rwanda Environment Management Authority, which is the national designated authority to the GCF NAP. GGGI, as a delivery partner, is supporting the government of Rwanda to be able to build flood resilience capacities across Rwanda. And what is very unique about this project is that we're not only restricting ourselves to the city of Kigali, but we have gone and selected strategic cities across the country that are facing similar challenges or similar opportunities, if one could look at it that way, in terms of the rate at which they are urbanizing. And as a result of their urbanization and the impacts that come from climate change, they've had to face different challenges in regard to floods and landslides. Now, what is the idea behind selecting different cities and going outside of the city of Kigali? It's to be able to appreciate the difference in the terrain, the difference in the rates of urbanization, and how urbanization is treated or approached in these different local environments. And the idea is that we are appreciating that you cannot apply similar solutions without contextualizing what you have taken from the city of Kigali to another city. So we selected 5 urban areas in 4 cities. That's the city of Kigali, Huye, Rusizi, and Kamonyi. So for those of you who have been in Rwanda, who have knowledge of Rwanda, you're probably fully aware that while they all have similar characteristics, there are differences in their terrain, there are differences in the way they agglomerate. And as a result, this defines how we will be assessing and putting in place interventions to deal with floods and landslides. We're also fully cognizant of the fact that the typical infrastructure development that has been done in the past will not suffice to be able to build urban resilience as well as community resilience. Therefore, we are embracing the important element of nature-based solutions in all the interventions that we're proposing throughout this project. What is also very critical is that we've appreciated that there's impact on the urban residents, but there's also impact on investments by private sector and impact on agricultural investments that are being driven by SMEs and cooperatives that have been established over the years. And so all the initiatives that we'll be looking at are tied to responding to the capacity, to building the capacity for these different aspects or these different entities to be able to be resilient enough to manage the impacts of climate change. During our private sector engagement, we've established that already private sector and cooperatives are doing quite a lot extensively. And so this is an opportunity for us to enhance their role, as well as build their capacity to be able to tap into climate finance through development of good project proposals and project pipelines. And then quite critical across the board is the fact that we are aware that the differentiated impacts, the impacts of climate change and the impacts of flooding and landslides are differentiated across gender as well as social strata. So all our interventions are targeted with a mindset of understanding that we must ensure there is a lens of gender equality as well as social inclusion in how we respond or how we propose different nature-based solutions to respond to the challenges of flooding and landslides. And most critical as well across the project implementation is stakeholder engagement and community engagement. We have central government entities, local government entities, private sector, both larger entities as well as SMEs and cooperatives involved in the execution of this project. And most importantly, we are cognizant of the importance of ensuring that gender defines the kind of stakeholders that we engage throughout the implementation of the project.
Thank you very much, Liliane. Again, a very broad perspective, a broad array of opportunities of nature-based solutions. You mentioned building codes. Actually, also Desmond addressed that, the bigger context of the adaptation plan and the different topographies, as you said. Learning from one place doesn't immediately give you the tools for the other. We have to deal with actual contexts and actual terrain. Very interesting to hear about, social inclusion and how you can address, of course, which has also been mentioned by the other speakers, the flooding and landslide with nature-based solutions. I want to move forward, bringing back Eric, talking a bit more about Freetown, and maybe we are able to connect some dots. And Eric, I would be really happy if you can shed a bit more light on how yes, please, we invite the others, of course, to join this interactive panel. But Eric, maybe can you kick off to shed a little bit more light on the community engagement aspect? You've been talking about, planting trees with the community. Would be interesting to have a better understanding of how you do it and what it means, because it also will lead to a lot of challenges, most probably. Eric, please, if you can.
Sure, absolutely. As I said, and as Liliane has just really emphasized, the social inclusion is absolutely critical. As was also raised by Desmond, the issue of community engagement. So our community engagement strategy under our sort of green infrastructure process is deeply rooted in the communities across the designated planting areas. And so in order for us to be able to ensure that we deeply engaged across the whole of the community, we use our council structures, but we also engage community-based organizations that have been working in these communities for many, many years. So we launched what we call our community planting and stewardship small grants program, where we then invited community-based organizations to apply. And then we selected through sort of a very intense process, community-based organizations that would then sort of be the anchor for tree planting and growing operations across each of the designated reforestation areas. And so those community-based organizations linked to the communities, to influencers, to structures within the communities to build what we call growing teams. And so those growing teams were serve as the tree stewards to ensure that trees are planted and grown both in private and public spaces. One of our issues is that a lot of the spaces where we need to plant are now private lands because there were levels of encroachment. We're not moving necessarily people away from there, but we're incorporating the tree planting, the reforestation in and around those spaces. So for instance, of the 245,000 trees that we planted in the upper catchment areas, 50,000 of those trees were planted on private lands. They were planted through backyard planting dynamics. So we those community-based organizations and those growing teams then linked to households and structured a process where the households would become stewards and they would plant and grow the trees. But then outside of that, there's planting that happens in public spaces. So within the community, we also created a process to ensure that there was gender inclusion, that we linked to youth, that we trained them and made them what we call climate action ambassadors, so that they understood deeply the impact of deforestation on the area and the technical and social dynamics around tree planting and growing. And so those teams, we have and maintenance to our digital tracking process, where each of those team members are designated to care for over the next 3 years a number of trees, whether it's 1,000 trees or it's 5,000 trees or it's 100 trees, and they receive an incentive based on the survival of each of those trees. So the growth process is connected and deeply rooted to those people who live in the community and who then systematically care for the trees that were planted and are to be grown in those spaces. And so,
Thanks.
for instance, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Eric. Let's get back to this issue a bit later. I want to really round the table, also asking Desmond, because I think there's a great bridge that you brought forward to, on one hand, so you talked about growing teams, you talked about the public and private planting on private land. This is also a question that I want to discuss a bit further on the private sector opportunities and the business case later on with Liliane. But first, I want to go to Desmond. You earlier said you're quite interested in the digital aspect and the monitoring that is happening in Freetown. But let's now move a little bit on the planning side, because how do you use science and data technologies to help determine Accra's unique climate vulnerabilities and to decide where interventions should go? Can you shed some light on that? And maybe we can create that connection of planning versus monitoring in terms of a nature-based solution. Desmond, please.
All right. Thank you very much. I think key to our strategy development has been the level of engagement with existing stakeholders. For instance, we're working with the EPA and the Forestry Commission. With the EPA, we looked at more the air quality data which was available, the areas that they monitor already. And we identified some gaps. One is that they mount their monitoring stations closer to the roads. And as I mentioned, one of the things we wanted to tackle was the air quality challenges. And so as we found out they are mounting closer to the roads, we couldn't really rely on that particular data for us in terms of the greening that we wanted to do. We also engage the Forestry Commission, what Eric was describing with the stewards. For instance, the Forestry Commission is doing a national forestation program and they use that strategy. But for the cities, over the past 10, 15 years, there's not been any specific strategy by the commission to target city forestry. And so the information based on all that and the rate we hear with our engagement with the city is that they are focusing outside of the city's boundaries. And so we did not have any specific science-based information. What I talked about, the divide between the east and west of the city, is that it is visual. Even if you stand on a very tall building, you see to the right, it looks green, to the left, not so green. So there's not been any scientific engagement. And that's why we engaged, or we signed up to the Cities for Forests program, because there was discussion that we could have some technology to estimate the number of trees cover in the city, and also to take action on where we should target our plans. And that is, I think that is part of the gaps that we have in Accra, that most of the information that we are working to are not steeped in science, but are more based on observations, and then tracking the kind of policy implementation that has happened. And if most of the policy on greening, for instance, have been targeted outside of city boundaries, not within. Now, in doing the climate related work, we are recognizing the heat island issues inside the city, because we are seeing we have paving that nobody wants to walk on during the afternoon, but in the evenings you see people just walking. So it's clear to us that, and people walk also better or more in areas that they have tree cover than where they don't. And so we are then deciding these are the actions we need to be taking to be able to kind of shift the transportation mode. Even though there's studies from the Ministry of Transport showing that the key mode of movement in Accra is by foot. People walk more, especially in the business district, than from other areas. So our question was, what would make people walk more, and or what is making people not walk? And if you observe that they walk in the evenings on better pavings, why would they not use that same space in the afternoons, and then would rather get on a trotro? If you've been in Accra, then you know what trotro is, the small mini buses. So those were trying to tie in all these concerns that we're working on, the health impact of air pollution, the level of cardiac related diseases, and trying to see what solutions we can bring in. So to a large extent,
yeah, please, can you wrap up?
Sure. That was it. That has been the case, that we don't have a clear scientific basis. We are looking forward to engaging to get more scientific based decisions based on science. Yeah.
Thanks, Desmond. I mean, you touched upon many things again, and it's clear that we are talking here about Vanguard cities, but you also really kind of addressed a gap in the access to kind of a science base for decision making. So it's something to move forward with. Liliane, can I ask you to briefly touch upon, because we want, of course, to have space to invite the Global Commissioner Emma Howard-Boyd to the panel, but can you briefly touch upon you talked about the private sector, about SMEs. How do you engage, not how do you engagement, but how do you develop fundable project with a strong business case that attract private sector investment? Can you just briefly shed some light? I know it's a very big question, but briefly shed some lights on it in 2 or 3 minutes. Sorry for that. Sorry, you are on mute, Liliane.
I'll try and make it quick and maybe focus on 1 or 2 examples so that I don't have to. Most of the interventions that we're looking to carry out in some of these cities are in informal settlements, or let me say unplanned settlements, not necessarily informal settlements, but unplanned settlements. And typically the solution is always to expect the government, central or local government, to come and intervene and obtain or provide solutions for the flooding and landslide issues. But in our discussions with private sector, in which we involved and actually had active representation of community upgrading committee members from these different informal settlements that we had identified that form part of the catchment, we started to see potential for private sector to actually drive the solutions. If I give one quick example, rainwater harvesting is one of the solutions that can be developed to be able to manage runoff volumes and runoff speeds. But typically the rainwater harvesting systems that have been developed in the past have always been ideal for what you would call a planned environment, an organized environment where you have adequate space to be able to incorporate these solutions. But in discussing with some of the private sector representatives who were there during our stakeholder engagement sessions, and then discussing with the community upgrading committee representatives, it became evident that this is an opportunity for private sector to roll out a unique product that could respond to the issue of rainwater harvesting and reuse of limited rainwater resource in informal settlements. That's one example that came to mind. When I talk about the SMEs and the cooperatives that are carrying out modern agricultural activities within the wetlands, you find that these are cooperatives that actually have already started to look for their own solutions to dealing with the impacts of flooding and landslides. And so being able to enhance their capacity by guiding them through a project pipeline development, by helping them tap into climate finance opportunities, and enhancing the element of them understanding that a partial or a shared investment by government, the SMEs, as well as potential climate fund entities can actually result in a more sustainable solution that can result in long-standing impacts that would be able to benefit these SMEs. So just in a nutshell, what I can say is that, as I said at the beginning of my earlier presentation, we have customized solutions to each city or each urban area that we are assessing. And so you'll find that there's already private sector players within these areas that are already establishing interventions that could benefit from proper planning, from proper strategizing, so that they can be able to tap into climate finance. And so this project is actually coming on board to help them tailor better projects that can be funded, but that can respond to their individual or their specific needs and their specific challenges, whether it's SMEs or much larger corporates and companies that have been significantly impacted by floods as well as landslides.
Thank you very much, Liliane. This is very, very, very clear. I want to now introduce and invite Commissioner Emma Howard-Boyd. It's really an honor to have you here in this session, very early morning for you, the chair of the Environment Agency in the United Kingdom. And you have heard the panel, and you're very passionate about this. And I really want to invite you to reflect on what you've heard, but also how you see the role of the UK and development agencies in this matter. And we have 9 minutes left on the clock. I want to give you as much as possible time. I'm not going to do a long summary at the end. So Emma, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. And it's been brilliant to hear the panelists share what they have been doing in their cities, and so much in common, I find, with cities all around the world. At yesterday's opening event, the UK Prime Minister said he will be making the need for a resilient recovery a priority of the UK's G7 presidency this year. Making it clear that we need to build back better, greener and faster. And at the Adaptation Finance Anchor event I co-hosted with Andrew Steer, a fellow commissioner, last night, Kristalina Georgieva said she felt the stars were aligning to make this happen. So if national governments prioritise access to green and blue spaces for adults and children in cities, this will also help resilience. Last week, communities in England narrowly avoided widespread damage from Storm Christoph. During the storm, I visited the city of Manchester in the north of England, where flooding and heatwave incidents have increased 10 times since the 1950s. The city, like most others, is preparing for future climate shocks, and the Environment Agency is working in partnership with many cities in England. But given the flooding last week, I'll briefly focus on Manchester. Over a 3-year period to 2020, Greater Manchester was the urban pioneer project linked to the UK government's 25-year environment plan. It showed how national and local government needs to work together to understand how best to further environmental objectives. It improved understanding of a natural capital approach and created a safe space for partners to come together and innovate, a key theme we've heard today. Along the way, we discovered that in Greater Manchester, air quality regulation has prevented around 60 deaths a year, 44,000 buildings benefit from reduced road traffic, and 1 million people have received mental health benefits, be given access to green spaces. The work's also led to a project called Ignition, which is led by Greater Manchester Combined Authority along with the Environment Agency, and it plans to strengthen resilience in the city by increasing green infrastructure 10% by 2038 using private investment. For example, replacing hard surface areas with green infrastructure, sustainable drainage systems could save £300,000 per year over 5 years in surface water drainage charges for around 250 school sites and deliver up to £83 million over 10 years to improve well-being, air quality, biodiversity and flood resilience. Over the last decade, over £60 million has been spent in better flood defences, protecting over 6,000 properties. This includes the Salford Flood Storage Scheme, which has delivered a fantastic new wetland, which has also created an amazing space for nature for the local community. We're currently working with organisations such as the Woodland Trust and Moors for the Future to create further natural flood management projects across Greater Manchester at the top of the catchments, which will also reduce flood risk and enhance the green space. Last week, the levels of the River Mersey broke records, but flood defences held firm. Across Greater Manchester as a whole, we estimate over 23,000 properties were protected by flood defences. It was a reminder that the economic benefits of being well prepared far outweigh the financial consequences. We know that for every pound used to improve protection from flooding and coastal erosion, we avoid around £5 of property damages. And around the world, the Global Commission on Adaptation has found that the benefits of adaptation are on average around 4 times greater than the costs. Investments in preparing for climate shocks not only help economic development, they also improve health and well-being by enhancing green and blue spaces. Cities and national governments will have a lot of expertise to share with the world, but everyone also has a lot to learn from each other. International collaboration to strengthen locally led action is vital. Ahead of COP26 this year, the UN has launched a race to net zero and the race to resilience, but we will lose these races if we're not backed by the trillions of finance we need, with nature-based solutions playing a leading role. With Joe Biden recommitting the US to the Paris Agreement, 2021 is the time for a truly global effort to reduce emissions and prepare for impacts. And again, we heard yesterday from many different leaders about the prioritization of adaptation finance into the work of development, but as important, need for this to be linked to private investment as well. Thank you very much for inviting me to listen to the panelists today. That's all I've got to say for now. Very happy to work with the other panelists to answer any more questions you've got. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. It's just great to hear you address on one end, looking at the kind of the bigger global community. And as you referred to the discussions yesterday on everybody agreeing on a greater investment on adaptation in the context of climate action. Great examples also from Manchester, and you see a lot of analogies between what's happening and what you mentioned and what we heard today. It is not for nothing that these Vanguard cities came together the last year in order to share experiences. And thank you, Ahmad Howard-Boyd, for being a global commissioner and advancing all this work with the Global Commission over the last year. Very much appreciated from the whole community. And we are moving into the kind of the last 2 minutes of this session, and I know that we've been cut off, so I can't open a longer discussion with all of you, but I really want to ask and to see if we can turn on our videos, inviting Emma, Eric, Desmond, and Liliane to at least say goodbye to each other. Thank you very much. We touched upon many things. We touched upon the role of community, of the private sector. We talked about science, about data. We talked about the multi-benefits of nature-based solution. And health for communities, for people in cities. And I think if we look at the recovery, because we haven't even had the time to talk about COVID-19 recovery, if you see an opportunity that is now really in front of us, it's use nature-based solutions in cities as an investment opportunity, as a way to recover from COVID-19, providing more healthy spaces in cities. So many things have been touched upon, the role of the private sector. So lots of work to do. And I want to really call upon everybody that's listening, partners, but also other cities that want to join this effort to move with us forward, galvanizing additional commitments towards COP26. Thank you very much. My name is Rogier van den Berg. I'm Director of Urban Development of World Resources Institute. Thanks a lot for your commitment this morning, and looking forward to further this discussion online and in other platforms. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Desmond. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Liliana. And thank you for the organization.
Thank you. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.